Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and we just passed the 100-day mark on our latest pond project, where we turned this dried-up prawn pond into this beautiful 30,000-gallon oasis. It's got cascading waterfalls, aquatic plants, tropical lilies, and an abundance of life. And after we built it, a variety of new species moved in and now call this place home, with a variety of fish, toads and frogs, bald eagles, ospreys, and much, much more. And the thing I love most about these aquascape ecosystems is you get an up-close look at a variety of different animals, and you get to watch them in their natural environment. And this pond will also create a lot of new life, as you'll be seeing here shortly in this video. But this was by far one of my favorite pond builds, and spanned over the course of several weeks, and it took a lot of machinery, manpower, and some very talented pond builders working together to create this beauty. But just in case you missed the original pond build, I'll give you a quick recap. So it all began by removing the sludge out of the original prawn pond, and then we started getting deliveries. And as you've probably noticed, this pond is primarily built out of huge boulders and cedar and oak logs. And our favorite stone is called an aqua blue stone, so we hauled in 100 tons of this stone from Wisconsin to Alabama. And after Ed sketched out the pond schematic, it was time to get started with excavation. So my goal was to make the pond around 5 feet deep, to give the fish plenty of places to hide from those predators like the bald eagles and ospreys. So after the excavation, we added the liner and geotextile material, and then started using logs to set the pond's edge with fallen trees from right here on the farm. And we mixed in some cedar stumps to give it that natural pond look, and also added a few fish dorms, or caves for those little guys to hide out. But a big portion of this project was finding the right trees and logs and stumps, and hauling them out of the woods over to the pond site, and then reshaping the dirt work. Next up, we built the wetland filter, which is an oversized filtration system, and we pump water from the main body of the pond through the bottom of this wetland filter, and that water gets filtered as it rises up through the aqua blocks and rocks, and then splashes down through the waterfall back to the pond. That's a wrap for today. Got the big tree set and some of the stonework in place right there. Also got some of the piping in place for the jets that are going to come up throughout the bottom of the pond. Got the post set for the dock. And as we got further along with the project, more and more of the aquascape crew came out to help. And that's when Mother Nature threw us a curveball, and it rained for 3 days straight. And it didn't really slow progress down much, but as you'll see later in the video, all the rain and extra mud that washed down into the pond created some issues in weeks to come. And during this phase of the project, we had multiple things going on at once. Some people excavating the waterfall area, others setting stones and big tree trunks, and we had to go find the perfect curved log to set right at the base of the beach area to help hold some of that sand in and keep it from washing into the pond. And after we got that set, it was time to deliver the sand. And the one thing we do have an abundance of here in South Alabama is that beautiful white beach sand. And we knew going into it, there was a good chance the truck would get stuck. So we hooked him up to some of the equipment and pulled him out. And we had one crew focused on building a dock. We also wanted to duplicate the same look we had with the 5-acre pond. And now it was time to begin setting the waterfall stones. Once the bottom layer of the pond was finished, we decided to fill it up with water and give it a good rinsing and wash some of that dirt out. So at this point, we were about 3/4 of the way done. We had to finish out the waterfall and also do the landscaping. And we only had 2 days left to finish it. And we made some trips down into the swamp on the property to gather some aquatic plants, including ferns and mosses and local plants that we know will thrive in this area. And with time running out, we started working well into the night with a primary focus of finishing up the waterfall while the rest of the people worked on landscaping. And we finally made it to the final day of the pond build. And there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot going on today. So we're finishing out the landscaping with some sod around the pond, and that's really going to help lock that loose dirt in. And I've learned from projects in the past, anytime you build a pond, erosion is your worst enemy. Not only does it wash loose dirt down into the pond, but you also have to pump it back out. But I've just shown you a quick glimpse of all the hard work that was done, and my hat's off to the Aquascape team. I'm always amazed at how fast they work and the incredible things they can create. And with all pond builds, you have to save the best for last, and that's the waterfall. And as you can see, it's a perfect combination of the cedar logs and boulders, and it has that natural look like you see with those fallen logs and creeks and streams everywhere. So there's a quick glimpse at how we turned my dried up prawn pond into a beautiful 30,000 gallon aquascape recreational pond. But this is where all the work ends and the real story begins, when all the different varieties of wildlife move into the new pond and call it home. And some of the first arrivals were the frogs and toads. They're always attracted to the sound of flowing water. And then we had one of our local favorites, the owl that we call Hooter, stop by to check it out. But we got the ultimate stamp of approval when the bald eagle stopped by to take a drink out of the pond. That's when you know you've done a good job. And back during the pond build, when we were adding some structure to the wetland filter, we specifically added one of the cedar branches in hopes that it would become an eagle perch. And so I got pretty excited the first time I saw the eagle land on the perch. I'd have to say that's majestic. And from time to time, we'll have random doggos stop by and take a quick bath in the pond. And as you can see here, even play around in a little bit of the beach sand. He's having a good time. But the bald eagles aren't the only ones. We've got a big variety of birds that typically fly in right here around the beach area. A lot of them will have a bird bath right there, including the osprey, as well as a group of crows. And anytime you have frogs, toads, and tadpoles, it's going to draw the snakes in. And now that we've seen the wildlife that enjoy the pond above water, let's take a look at what swims beneath. So we started out by adding a pair of tiger bass that had just spawned out of the 5-acre pond, and we named these little guys Johnny and June. And Johnny and June had an immediate connection. Anywhere you saw one of them, the other one was right beside. So the next thing to do was stock it full of bait fish, so we added 1,000 golden shiners. And we didn't want this one to just be a bass pond, so we wanted to add a variety of species, including these 2 rainbow trout that we call Mike and Molly trout. And we're not as familiar with rainbows this far south, so the one thing I was very surprised about is how aggressive a rainbow trout can be. And one day I was walking the edges of the 5-acre pond, and I saw some bass fry that had just hatched that day. And I was able to catch one of the little guys, and we added him to the wetland filter and decided to name him Truman. And next up were 3 tilapia that we added for one very specific reason. Tilapia are great at cleanup duty, and they will constantly eat algae. So they got to work right away and have helped us keep the pond clean. And with our 5-acre pond, we lined it with clay, so I was never able to add crawfish to it. But with this particular pond and the geotextile material and the thick liner, there's no concerns with crawfish burrowing through them. So we caught some down at the creek, dropped them in, and haven't seen them since. And you cannot have a pond without having turtles. So one of our subscribers brought over 4 baby turtles, a couple of red ear sliders, and the other 2 are yellow belly sliders. And they fit right in with the rest of the crew. It's fun watching them either hanging out around the beach area, but when we first put them in, they were a little skittish, but they've warmed up to us a little now. And anytime you have 4 turtles, there's no better name than the Ninja Turtles. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of mud that got washed into the pond during the construction. And initially, I was having trouble with it because it was getting trapped in the wetland filter beneath tons of rocks. But I finally found the best method to remove all that dirt and mud by draining the pond down and then pumping high volumes of water from the main body of the pond, and then also placing a second pump in the clean-out pipe, which allows you to pump water out of the base of the wetland filter. And as you can see, that's where all that mud and dirt was trapped. So after we pumped the muddy water out for 2 to 3 hours, we got everything completely rinsed out of there, and we're finally able to achieve that crystal clear water. Next up, we installed some irrigation to keep all the plant life happy, but one of the most valuable additions to this entire pond project was this 25-foot drain. Because like I mentioned, erosion can be the worst enemy of a new pond. And as you'll see here in this video, we get a lot of water flow right down into this area. So the drain is right where the red arrow is. And as all that water flows down into the drain, it redirects it around this new pond, underground, and drains it into the 5-acre pond where we want it to go. So this one drain has saved us a lot of headaches. But my favorite part about having that crystal clear water is you get to see what goes on beneath the surface. And I couldn't have been more excited when I saw Johnny and June spawning right there at the base of some lily pads. Because in all my years of having bass as pets, we've never had a successful spawn. But as you can see, we've got dozens of little baby bass, and there's one of those little baby turtles checking them out. So at this point, the pond was looking great, but I got a call from Greg the pond guy. He wanted to add some finishing touches by planting some aquatic lilies. And the interesting thing about aquatic lilies is they only last 1 year. So after they die off this winter, they won't be returning next spring. But they do fit in perfect with this pond. They look great and grow fast. And another cool thing about these, some of them bloom during the daytime and others bloom at night. And the last fish addition to this pond was our pet bass that we call Tiger. He was the first bass that we ever caught out of the 5-acre pond, and we raised him up in a 300-gallon aquarium, and he quickly became friends with Johnny and June. And after adding that third bass to the mix, we were able to start seeing their competitive nature. And it's one of my personal favorite things to see, those topwater blow-ups. So they would team up together and pin those schooling golden shiners into a shallow pocket, and then attack. Gotta love seeing that. And we were happy to see that the little bass fry that we added to the wetland filter named Truman survived and was doing good, so we started experimenting with different foods. And one day we were very surprised to see a second bass show up, and we have no idea how he got in there, so we decided to name him Houdini. So we'll feed him little small shad, crickets, and worms. They're fun to watch. And today's video is brought to you by Element. After long hot days out here at the farm, it's important to stay hydrated. And in our previous videos, you've seen the drink mix hydration packs, but Element is excited to announce a new way to stay hydrated with Element Sparkling. And it offers the same zero sugar electrolyte formulation now in a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling water. And Element has formulated the perfect amount of sodium, potassium, magnesium, and zero sugar to keep you hydrated. And the right amount of electrolytes can help you maintain steady energy, improve cognitive function, have fewer headaches and muscle cramps, and also keep your skin hydrated. And the sparkling flavors include citrus salt, watermelon salt, grapefruit salt, as well as the debut of the new black cherry lime flavor, only available in sparkling. So if you're interested in checking out the drink mix packets or the new sparkling, go to drinklmnt.com/BamaBass, and you can get a free Element sample pack with any order by using the link in the video description. And each sample pack includes 1 packet of 8 flavors. But the best part is, they have a no questions asked refund policy. So do me a favor, go check them out and join the Salty Rebellion. Alright, now that you've gotten the full update on the 30,000 gallon pond we call Cedar Falls, let's go check in on the 5-acre pond that we call the Crimson Oak. So every time I get a chance, I like to come out here right when the sun's setting and toss some shiners off the dock and watch some of the feeding action. And I'll have to say, during the peak of the summer, you're going to be seeing some aggression. Some of these bass will go airborne and not even let the shiner hit the water. But while we're feeding them, I did want to talk about one concern I'm having with the bass in the 5-acre pond. So later in this video, you'll see some of the fish catches, and every time we catch one of the bass, we weigh it and record it in a database. And I was starting to get a little concerned because some of the weights on the fish are actually dropping rather than going up. And there may not be any need for concern because typically in the spring, the bass weigh the most, and then after the females spawn, they'll lose a good portion of that weight. But I was just hoping that by the beginning of July, they would have recovered that weight and possibly added some on. But one of the main reasons that I've kept that database is because it'll give me an insight on problems, and hopefully I can catch them and correct the problem before it gets too big and out of hand. So for instance, when you have bass that aren't putting on weight, it could be a few different things. They could start overcrowding, so we may have to start removing some of them out of the pond. It could also mean a shortage of bait fish, but I don't think that's the problem because we have an abundance of threadfin shad, plenty of bluegill, a big population of baby tilapia, and then we also supplement the prawns in. But the one unknown and potential mistake I made was adding the rainbow trout in this past fall. I think I underestimated how aggressive they were, and so it is possible that the rainbow trout put a big dent in their food source, and they're still recovering from that. But I'm going to keep monitoring it, and if I need to, we'll stockpile the bait in until we start seeing those weights come back up. But one other thing I suspect it could be is the size of the bait that these bass prefer. And I watch them a lot at night, and they'll swim along with the bluegills and don't really seem to be interested in attacking them. So I think they're primarily targeting a lot of these smaller bait fish, and it just takes a lot more of them to keep them full. So for example, here's a quick clip of them at night, and the bluegill do not seem to be threatened at all. And if you pay close attention, I think some of these bass are eating little water bugs and mosquitoes off the surface of the water. So if they're wasting energy on those small returns, that could be part of the problem. And that's why I'm confused, because if you saw in the last video, there is an abundance of bait in this pond. So this one does have me scratching my head a little. So I also started monitoring the fish feeding cameras, because if you know anything about a bass, they love an easy meal. So the one time I think they would be interested in eating bluegills is when the feeders go off and they know they can easily go up there and attack one. So if you watch closely, there are a couple of big bass hits. Usually you'll see the bluegill pop up in the air. So maybe things are starting to make a turn, because I know if the bass are eating bluegills, they're going to put on weight quick. There's also probably some tilapia mixed in this group, and now that we've got bass in the 3 and 4 pound range, they should be big enough to start eating some of those adult tilapia. But speaking of food source, I'm always trying to add new varieties, so let's check in on the prawns, and some of these guys have gotten big. So we've got a heavy dose of the protein pellets every day, and I think last year by August and September we had started moving some of them into the 5-acre pond and doing some feedings. And now these little guys have gotten big enough, each time I drop some pellets in, they go over and grab an individual pellet. But these guys are aggressive and fight over food, so they'll try to steal each other's pellets. The life of a prawn is a tough one. Alright, I've been trying to find a good way to feed the prawns out here when I'm gone. I finally found a pretty cool little invention here. So you preload each of these little slots with the protein pellets, and I'll give you a quick demonstration by putting it in manual here. Basically it slides that little green door open and then indexes over one slot and drops the prawn food in. Perfect. Pretty cool little invention there. So as long as the raccoons don't come over here and steal all the food, the prawns will get fed every day. But here's an interesting clip I got at night. If you see where that red arrow was pointing, there's a little mouse right out there on the beach area. You can see the little shining eyes. And he settled right over there on that log. And if you look over to the left, you'll see a snake easing up to him. And the snake is very smart. You see him get off the side and then come up through the crease of the side so he can use that to hide his approach. And the interesting thing is, he was getting really close, and I'm not sure if he lost sight of the mouse or either wants to circle back around, but he aborts the mission and makes a big circle, and at this point, the mouse hops away. And the snake does come back and lifts his head up to see if he's still there. You waited too late. And so the snake heads back to what's probably his home and goes for a swim in the pond. So now we're going to take a trip on the back end of the pond dam down into the swamp. And I don't come back here too often because it's really grown up, but we're thinking about improving the land this fall and cutting some trails through to make it accessible. But today I'm going to head deep into the swamp and put some cameras out, so we'll see what's lurking around down here. But it stays wet most of the year, and this is where we got a lot of our aquatic plants from. And we got a spider that just caught a horsefly for lunch. So I made it down here to the creek. This is where we put the crawfish traps out in the past. We've still got some flowing water. And then I found this nice open space that looks like it could be a crossing of the creek. So hopefully there's a big variety of animals coming through this area. So I got some cameras set out here. One set out over there. Got the old crawdad holes. Look at all the ferns out there. Man, that's pretty. And first up, we got a young buck in velvet. You can always tell when they came from the swamp with that mud on their feet. And a nanny crossing the creek. Mr. George Cooney. So that's all we had today. We'll keep an eye on these cameras, and hopefully you'll see something cool coming up. So I was out here checking in on the pond today, and look what we have over here in the beach area. Looks like we have a little spawning bed. My guess is the tilapia, they spawn every 21 days. So hopefully we'll be seeing some baby tilapia in here that'll also help feed the bass. But in the meantime, we're going to stock 2,000 golden shiners. We got one size here that's a little bit smaller, and then this other bag is a little bit bigger that we'll be using to feed off the dock some. I'm about to release these, and you can see the fish are ready. That's Tiger eyeing a few of the others that are left in the pond. Should get to see some good feeding action. I always like to dump them in the waterfall area because it's high in dissolved oxygen, And that's what these little guys need the most right when you put them in. And it's just a shiner buffet for the bass. They just sit right there at the base of the waterfall and let the current bring them right into their mouth. So I put an underwater camera right here just so you could see the speed of a largemouth. The shiners do not have a chance. So with all this feeding activity, I gotta catch a couple for Truman and Houdini. Truman! Hey little buddy. Man, I really love the look of these tropical lilies up here. Probably something I'm going to start adding every year, and could potentially even add some down in the 5-acre pond. Also makes a perfect habitat for these two little bass. Let's try to feed one to Houdini. So I put some underwater cameras down in Cedar Falls, and if you pay close attention to these schooling golden shiners, you'll see that one fish in particular doesn't match the rest. And that's one of those little bass fry from Johnny and June. Has grown up a little, and he's the exact size of the golden shiners right now. And there's another good look at him, but that's why a lot of these small bass fry don't make it to adulthood, because they end up getting eaten by bigger fish, even bass, because they look just like the rest of their bait. So Liz planted a garden this year, and Oliver's her biggest fan every time she gets some vegetables out of the garden. But anytime she has any that get too big, rather than wasting them, she chops them up and feeds them to the wildlife. So we'll put some on the peanut picnic table, and some over here at the squirrel house, and let's see what they like. The crow chose the watermelon. That's a cool shot. The primary resident of the squirrel house is the mouse we call Gus Gus, and he is protecting his house from any intruders. Love seeing that. And little Gus Jr. bringing some of the squash into the house later that night. We also had a salamander make his first appearance. And Gus Gus had a long day protecting his house. It's time for bed. Alright, got a little afternoon thunderstorm. Fish should be biting. So we're going to catch a few and use this scanner to scan them and see if they've been tagged before. If they hadn't been tagged, we'll inject a pit tag, get a weight on them. We're going to try out some top water with the whopper plopper and the spinnerbait. Got him. Right off the antenna. Alrighty, it's a good one. Alright, this fish is 69736 and it weighs 2.07. And this fish is named Swim Shady. Slight decrease in weight over a few weeks. Nothing major to worry about here. Got him. Oh, he's pulling drag. There's a nice largemouth. That one may be pushing 3 pounds. Alright, this fish is 569610. 2.57. So this is really interesting. This is one of the Florida strain bass that we put in back in February. And this particular bass weighed almost 3 pounds, but it was full of eggs and ready to spawn. So it's slightly concerning that it's lost some weight, but if it doesn't put it back on in the next few months, then I think we'd have a problem. There we go. Over that grass. It's a little thicker. Alright, this fish has been caught and it's 570148 and it weighs 2.24 pounds. Now we got Flipper here with some good weight gain. That's what we're looking to see. So the reason all these fish are right here in this pocket is, if you remember, that's the deepest part of the pond right there, 12 feet deep. Got a big brush pile down there, and then this year, for the first time ever, grass started growing right here along these banks. So the bass are just sitting down there deep, feeding up here shallow as those shad swim by. Guaranteed to get a bite on that one. Ooh, there we go, top water bite. Everyone's been right here at the bank. Nope, it has been caught. 571111. It weighs 1.54. And Xerxes here lost some weight, but it could have been post-spawn. With that little bit of difference, it's nothing major. A little bitty guy. Man, this may be the smallest one I've ever caught this year. Definitely a second or third generation bass, but he is aggressive. Like the little guy. Got him. Right here, this little rain just started. They're biting good. This looks like a good one. Oh yeah. Good bite right out here in the rain. Alright, this fish is 570589 and it weighs 2.55. Nice one. And this fish is ultra and has been staying right there around that 2.5 pounds the last few times we caught it. There we go. What we got here? Little guy. It's a healthy fish. Got a little wound right there on his bottom. It's the one where the sore's been caught. 69984, and it weighs 1.65. And here we have the pond guy, and that's another one I'd say is concerning. It's lost about 1/3 of a pound, but it also had that wound that may have had some factor in that. So I'll be keeping a close eye on all the fish weights here moving forward. All right, down here at the half acre, you can see where the raccoons and different animals been scratching in the dirt, ready to get some more feed. So we're gonna put out a apple flavored attractant block, some more protein pellets, and see what comes out tonight. All right, time to feed the deer. I always like to experiment this time of year with some different types of protein pellets. So we got Antler King and Buck Booster, and I'll just put one of them on the left half, one of them on the right half, and see what the deer like more. Antler King on the left, Buck Booster on the right. So in the last video, I asked you all to help me name the 2 squirrels, and M.W. Colburn said Chippendale, so I love that name, but now we have a 3rd squirrel we have to name. But here's one I've got to show you. Chip has some moves. Watch closely as he tries to avoid a hawk attack. And man, he zigged and zagged right when he needed to, and barely escaped the hawk. Whew, close call for Chippendale. And we got a little buck here in velvet. Should start growing those antlers out soon. That's when you know you got some good food out, when the raccoons are fighting over it. But it didn't take long and they made up. And then a bachelor group of bucks joined them. Hey, look at there, George Jones found him a girlfriend. He's chasing her around. And here's an interesting buck. If you look closely, he's got a split main beam. We got a few happy bucks bouncing around and playing. And a big herd of does moving through. And you can see this young buck is skeptical about the feed block. As are all the rest of the bucks. Anytime you put out a new source of food, they're not sure what to think about it. But George Cooney says, more food for me. And the young Spike, still not sure what to think about it. Raccoons are having a feast, while the deer are too spooked. But they're getting a little bit closer now. Hey, look at there. Like one big family out here eating together. So we were able to do some traveling recently, and anytime I see water features in other places, I always like to use them for ideas and motivation for future projects. And we were down in the Bahamas, and I feel like it's the land of water features. Every time we turned around a corner, there was a new waterfall or flowing creek with a wide variety of fish in it. And you also notice they did a really good job of landscaping around their water features. But one thing I like to pay close attention to is the colors of the rocks. And with this one, they did a good job with the contrast between the white stone and all the green and vibrant plants. And even Oliver was admiring it for a second until he had to take a business call. But one of the other things we really enjoyed about the Bahamas is their food. And if you'll notice, a lot of these meals were really healthy. They come from the gardens and ocean, and this particular dish is called a conch salad. And I'll have to say, by far one of the best tasting things I've tried down here. But I was impressed with their fish cooking method. We were pleasantly surprised by the octopus and other variety of saltwater dishes. But most of their water features were saltwater, and it got me thinking, maybe we should build a saltwater pond next. Might be pretty cool to have some sharks swimming around. Even a baby hammerhead, maybe? But you could tell right away the island life is completely different. The animals aren't scared of you. So it was a great trip, incredible scenery, lots of cool things to do like walking through a tunnel of sharks, swimming with the sea turtles, and I was happy to even see some local fish like these gar down in the Bahamas. And we even spotted a wild young Bama Bass Jr. roaming the airports. He's recently started walking, and this little guy is ready to explore. But half the time, he's got his hat covering up his eyes, so he's walking blind. We definitely don't need him to be leading the way. Well, I hope you enjoyed following along the journey of the pond we call Cedar Falls, and make sure to hit that subscribe button to see what happens over the next 100 days. Hope y'all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.